Prepare yourself for the terror. The prison of madness, where few enter and none return.
Welcome to Unsung Horrors. With Lance. And Erica.
Leave all your sanity behind. It can't help you now.
Welcome to another episode of Unsung Horrors, the podcast where we review underseen horror movies, specifically those with fewer than 1,000 views on Letterboxd. I'm Lance.
And I'm Erica.
And for this episode, we have a special guest joining us to chat about my pick. He is the author of Swedish Death Metal, which covers the history of the title. He's also shredded in many extreme metal bands throughout the last few decades, including the dominated You Suppress, which I'll be pulling a song from to close out this show, Tyrant, Martyrded, Iron Lamb, Della Morte, Discontu, and Incision. And he also wrote a book that I love, and I've mentioned a few times already on the podcast, Swedish Sensations Film, a clandestine history of sex, thrillers, and kicker cinema. I recommended this book during our National Reading Month posts all last month, if you follow us on Instagram. And it's the essential Swedish film companion and is a must pick up for film fans of any genre. So without further ado, joining us from Stockholm, Sweden, welcome Daniel Ekeroth.
Oh, thank you so much. It feels nice to speak about this book for once and the Swedish film of,
Nice.
of the lower quality or lower.
We love the low quality stuff. So yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, there's so much people want to speak about Swedish death metal, but the movie is it's an unknown thing to most.
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, I briefly threw out a few of the amazing projects that you've been involved in, but since we'll be specifically talking about Swedish horror film this episode, and if some of our listeners have never heard of Swedish Sensations films, can you tell us a little about what Swedish Sensation films are and what inspired you to write this book?
Well, basically, the word we invented ourselves because I thought it would sound generic to just call the book Swedish exploitation cinema. So we invented a word to describe this very different kind of movies that you can incorporate. Any movie that have some sensational aspect to it just to sell tickets or to get itself known. And I grew up loving movies, but we never had a VCR and we lived in the forest. There was no cinemas. So I just dreamed about the day when I can move away from home and start watching movies. And that's what I did. I started collecting movies as soon as I moved away from home. And of course, as everyone else, I got into in Italian horror movies and the Italian Western and stuff like that. But along the way, we discovered that there was also a Swedish underground cinema culture and that was written very, very little about it. So after writing a book about Italian movies, they decided, let's do about Swedish films.
Oh, nice. So you have one for Italian films too?
Yeah, that was my first book. And it's not very good. It's just learning violent Italy.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we pressed 1,000 copies and sold them also.
Nice.
Worked out, but 20 years ago or something.
Nice. And Swedish Sensations films, this book is still available at Bazillion Points, the publisher?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
I hope.
Yeah, it is.
Maybe they sold out.
I don't have any left, so I need to get some myself. People ask about it all the time. But,
Well, that's good.
And your Swedish death metal book, is that sold directly through you?
I mean, Bazillion Points too, but that one I'm constantly selling. It never stopped selling, so I always have copies at home.
Yeah, we'll add links and information on where you can purchase Daniel's books in the show notes. But yeah, I had one more question too. I mean, I mentioned all the bands that you've played in the past. Are you currently in a band right now?
I mean, Martyrded and Iron Lamb, and I mean, we are both gonna do new albums this year, I think, and I mean, there's no gigs going on right now, but we have
Right.
we have stuff booked that will be cancelled. That's how it works these days. I also have a black metal band in another town, but we only make records called the Third Storm. So,
Sweet. And you play bass, right?
Yeah, nowadays mostly bass.
Nice, cool. So, as I already mentioned, I picked up Daniel's book late last year and was just immediately inspired to seek out many of the films that are covered in the book. And as most of these films, like you already mentioned, Daniel, are just incredibly underseen, the horror films included fit right into our unsung horrors requirement of having under 1,000 views on Letterboxd. So I kind of felt like I was a kid in a candy store in that regard, like with all the potential future picks. So Eric and I have already chatted about Vac Stockin, which was my pick for a previous episode, which was really great. But I'm really excited to chat with Daniel and Erica about my pick for today's episode, which is Blood Tracks from 1985.
We're here to shoot one scene for a rock video that's going to be published with Solid Gold's next album.
A young and beautiful rock group on location. Then the terror struck.
Shit! Jesus Christ! Holy shit! I'm not receiving you.
Please hear it.
Trapped by a family of maniacs. The fire will burn to the final attack. Never-ending terror.
What the hell's happening here? I don't know. I think everybody else is dead.
As of this recording, Blood Tracks only has 640 views on Letterboxd, and you can find it on YouTube. And there is a Swedish DVD release out there. Do you own that, Daniel, or have you seen that?
No, yeah, of course.
Cool.
I know those people who releases all of this stuff nowadays. So they have released tons of stuff that were unavailable before. So it's better days now.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so as usual, we'll be diving into discussing pretty much anything and everything we want about Blood Tracks. And for the listeners out there, I'll now be spending a few minutes on a synopsis, which includes spoilers. Although Blood Tracks really isn't a film that can be spoiled, even if you're told what happens. It's just like an experience that you have to, sit through. Because, director Mats Helge Olsen, his films, the logic and plot are pretty much thrown out the window. But if you do want to stay away from any spoilers, now's the time to hit pause, watch it, and come back to us. Okay, so there are a ton of characters involved in Blood Tracks, and it's kind of tough to keep track of all of them and the names that are very rarely mentioned. So I'm going to do my best with this summary. The film opens in 1940, showing a stumbling drunk man heading home to his wife and kids, who all appear scared to death of him. As the mother tells the kids to go to the bedroom, the father is demanding to know where the money his wife has hidden is located. And scrambling through the cupboard, he finds a handful of coins. As he collects the money, the mother grabs a knife and they struggle. The husband slices his wife's throat with the blade, but not killing her. And as the husband walks away and the kids call out to their mom, she grabs the knife and drives the blade into her husband's back, killing him. The mother rounds up all 5 of her kids and runs out of the building where a man yells, "Murder!" at them. It's now 1985. And we see beautiful snowy landscapes with a caravan of cars, trucks, and trailers driving down the road, and a weird narrator pops up and begins catching up the viewer on what's occurred over the last 40 years, letting us know that the family hid out in the middle of nowhere, and now intruders are on their way. Boom! Blood Tracks splashes across your screen, and Solid Gold's song starts playing. The caravan pulls up to a large cabin, and there's a swarm of screaming fans and press outside. And it's here that the rock band Solid Gold climb out of the cars with Bob, their manager, who explain that they've come to this isolated community for one reason: to film a scene for their next rock video. As they load into the cabin, John and Sonny, the local guides, mention potential avalanche conditions in the area. However, Solid Gold's manager isn't hearing any of it because they're on a tight schedule and they need to get their shots for the day. We then learn that there's an abandoned factory nearby which some random guy named Frank is checking out. Lucky for us, he does, because he's walking around the factory. It's revealed that there are some deformed-looking humanoids living there, obviously the family, the mother and her sons from the cold open. When Frank sees one of these deformed-looking men, they begin fighting, and Frank is killed. The deformed killer is then run off by a bearded brother, and the other mother walks up saying, "They almost discovered us." And cut to Solid Gold's manager, Bob, who sees the factory from a distance and says it's the perfect place to film their video. The whole crew head out to film. All the girls get into wardrobe for the video shoot, and their outfits are obviously skimpy, making them, quote, freeze their tits off. Up walks Solid Gold with the laziest greeting ever, giving the girls a hey and a hug. And the next thing you know, Blood Tracks filming has started, and the dudes from Solid Gold are literally throwing themselves down a snowy mountain and going all in as rockers, giving the camera their best angry snarls and pretending to play their instruments to a playback track. All this rocking isn't safe for the climate, though, and it's here that we experience our first avalanche of the movie. They wrap up the shoot and head back to the cabin, but as they're leaving, Bob sends Nick, the cameraman, out to the factory to get some inlay and shots for the next shoot. In the factory, the deformed dwellers are watching him, and while filming, he triggers a booby trap that results in him getting hit in the head. The sound guy, Dave, shows up to help him, and they head back to the cabin, where Solid Gold are drinking it up and partying with the ladies. While they're in the cabin, our second avalanche occurs off in the distance. This gets one of the girls super horny, so she and one of the band members run outside into a car to fuck. As the crew inside the cabin tries to work on a CB radio to reach John and Sonny, their guides, another avalanche occurs, this time reaching the cabin and burying the two lovebirds who are screwing in the car. The rest of the band and the entourage run outside and immediately start digging them out, and we're given about a good 2 minutes of Solid Gold rescuing this naked girl from the car. Back in the cabin, the party continues, while they continuously try to reach John and Sonny and help via the CB and walkie-talkie. As Dave, the sound guy, heads back outside to get recordings of the avalanches, Nick, the cameraman, is looking over his footage from the factory with Bob, their manager, and they see a weird face. While recording avalanche sounds, Dave makes his way into the factory, and he's immediately killed, as one of the deformed killers breaks his neck. Dave's girlfriend of some sort, Carrie, heads to the factory to look for him and finds his recording equipment and runs back to the cabin, where they all listen to the tape, hearing Dave struggling. Bob, the manager, heads back to the factory with Nick and Carrie while the band members and groupies stay at the cabin to party and fuck. Back at a different cabin, guides Sonny and Johnny pick up a weak CV signal for help coming from the crew, and they work to get a snowmobile to check it out. Once in the factory, Bob, Nick, and Carrie split up to look for Dave. One of the Solid Gold band members, Keith, and a groupie named Linda followed them to the factory, and once inside, Keith has his head immediately cut off by one of the deformed killers, and Linda is attacked and drug off. Another deformed killer douses Nick, the cameraman, with gasoline and lights him on fire, burning him alive as Bob looks on in terror and starts crying. As Bob continues to look for Dave, he comes across the groupie Linda, who is tied up and gagged. As he moves to save her, he triggers a booby trap, which cuts Linda in half, giving us some nice gore effects. Back at the cabin, Susie is able to get a hold of John and Sonny again on the CB, and John spends about 2 minutes explaining how to use a CB radio with her. Learning they're in trouble, John heads out to the cabin by snowmobile while Sonny readies the chopper. Back at the factory, Carrie is caught by one of the deformed killers, and she is thrown over some railing to her death, impaled on a spike. And back at the cabin, Solid Gold are still fucking and sucking, and one of the deformed killers breaks in and murders them all except a few groupies. One of them, Sarah, is hiding in the cabin, while another, Luis, is taken and drugged back to the factory. Bob, the manager, shows up at the cabin and finds Sarah, and John, the guide, shows up on a snowmobile with a rifle, and he and Bob get into revenge mode to kill these animals who are murdering everyone. Back at the factory, the deformed brothers throw Luis, the groupie they took from the cabin, in, quote, the pit, and chain her up as instructed by the mother. And Susie is now in the factory, and as Bob calls her on her walkie-talkie, the deformed killers hear her and drag her away as they all grunt like Tim the Toolman Taylor. Back at the cabin, one of the deformed guys starts chasing Sarah, and she jumps on the snowmobile, dragging him through the snow. This doesn't last long, though, as he's able to get to her and kill her, breaking her neck. And back at the factory, John the guide calls Sonny to get the chopper there ASAP. John is then attacked by one of the deformed guys, but wins the fight, stabbing the killer to death. As John is resting, it's here we get our first real conversation take place between the deformed family, with one of them, I'll call him the bearded one, urging his mother to stop his brothers from killing, but she's saying they all deserve it, and the women are evil because of how they're dressed. The bearded one then runs to Luis, who's still chained in the pit, asking her for help. He explains how he and his family have lived in peace in the factory for many years, but his mother has instructed his animal brothers to kill everyone for arriving and finding them. Bob the manager finds one of the deformed brothers in the factory and becomes really confused and starts asking 21 questions about why they're doing this. As the deformed brother squeaks a dog toy in response, Bob gets pissed and shoots him. A deformed brother then throws a hatchet, hitting Bob square in the face and causing him to fall to his death over some railing. The mother then begins choking Luis in the pit, and the struggle causes a lantern to fall, igniting a fire that burns the old mother alive. Luis is then chased, and she triggers another booby trap, getting stuck in a bear trap while a huge steel hook impales her, as Susie and John look on in horror. And at this point, Sonny shows up with a helicopter and rushes inside the factory and immediately starts shooting and kills one of the deformed brothers. As Susie is running out of the factory with John, the bearded brother grabs her leg and John shoots his hand off. In the severed hand, which is still moving, is a necklace with a crucifix, which Susie lost in the factory earlier, indicating that all he wanted to do was give her back her necklace. As the bearded one cauterizes his wound, Susie, John, and Sonny hop into the chopper and take off, giving us the most rushed ending ever. So that is Blood Tracks.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah, that's good.
Even your summary, I'm still having a hard time because there's so many characters. I know we'll talk about it, but there's so many characters in this. I can't keep track of everybody.
I mean, I can't even guarantee that I have the names right.
You probably don't.
It's just me just kind of going with it. But that is Blood Tracks. Like I said, if you haven't watched it, I didn't spoil anything. It's just as confusing as it sounds. You just have to see what unfolds on screen. But let's dive into the crew, the cast and crew. The director and co-writer of Blood Tracks is Mats Helge Olsen, using the name Mike Jackson in the credits. And Daniel, you know way more than either of us do when it comes to his career. So can you give us and our listeners some details?
But we should go through his career. It's pretty short, but it's got different periods, different times when he did different things. But he was born in 1953 in Lidköping, a very small town in Sweden, and was failing in school, apparently. Didn't have any grades. No one thought anything of him. But he wanted to do movies. And I've heard he went to Stockholm and tried to make anyone help him to make movies, but nothing ever came of that. So it seemed doomed, but then he met another character, so to say, known in Sweden as Big Bengt, who was a megalomaniac, guy who sold secondhand things and started to build an empire for himself. He bought a bunch of old telephone poles and built a Western-style cabin out of those. And that started what would eventually become a theme park, a Western-themed, amusement park. And somehow Mats Helge Olsson and this guy, Bengt Erlandsson, or Big Bengt, as he called himself, they met in the mid-70s. And Mats Helge wanted to make a movie, and Big Bengt wanted to expand his Western theme park. And the rumors said that he couldn't get he wasn't allowed to build anything more. He didn't have the construction rights. But if they made it as movie sets, then he could build it. So they just invented it. Oh, let's make a couple of Western movies. You want to make movies, and I want to build these things. So I think that was the situation. That some sort of collaboration. So they built the theme park as movie sets and did 2 Western movies. Dead Man's Trail, the first one, and then Frozen Stars, the second one that's barely anyone has seen because the original burned up apparently after the premiere. So that was the starting point for Mats Helge. Those couple of Western movies with this other sort of crazy guy, and got himself going. But the second movie burned up. Nothing much happened. But somehow he then struck some sort of friendship with a very famous Swedish actor, another crazy guy. I mean, but he was a real actor from the theater and real movies called Per Oscarsson.
Yeah, he's in Backstalking, right?
Yeah, he's the main guy there, and I think he's worked with Ingmar Bergman and everyone. In big actor, but a very eccentric guy. But those two struck a friendship too, and in the late 70s, early 80s, they started to make different projects together, but which all of this culminated in a movie called Sverige åt svenskarna, or Sweden for the Swedes, which was some sort of big historical drama about Sweden, in which Per Oscarsson was supposed to have 4 roles as 4 different kings. And Mats Helge Olsson was in charge of economy, which was a very, very bad thing. But he didn't know anything about economy. And they hired, just about any Swedish known actor is in that movie. It's insane. It's everyone. It's the most expensive Swedish movie of all time. And it's the biggest failure of all time. Because
what's the runtime of it? Like, is it like 4 hours long?
No. It's just like an hour and a half.
Okay.
And because all the money disappeared and no one got paid and they got so many lawsuits. So, Per Oscarsson, he just walked away from it. Didn't care. But Mats Helge Olsson was in charge of the economy. So he got prosecuted and went to jail for years.
Oh, wow.
So there was a disaster, but the movie got finished, but it's just a fucking mess. It's not good. So I think he was stopped from making movies for a long while after that, because all these court hearings and stuff was going on. But during that time, he then went with his golden age, so to speak of. He met a guy called Charles Aperia, who ran a videotape company in Sweden called Videotape Center. I think they also had in the UK and the rest of Europe. It was but he ran the Swedish part of it. And he also met a guy called Bo F. Munthe, who was a ninja, multi-martial art guy, wrote books about how to be a ninja. And those 3 guys together decided we should make a movie about ninjas. And Charles, he was I'm gonna release it on video and produce it, and Mats Helge was gonna direct it, and Bo F. Munthe was gonna be in charge of the ninjas and the fighting. So they started this project, completely maverick, and they hired actors from Poland to get it cheap, but they were big Polish actors, and did this movie called The Ninja Mission, which probably his most professional movie, done in the streets of the small town of Lidköping for no money at all. And it, as it turned out, became extremely successful. On video in Sweden, I remember renting it when we were young and watching it. And, we saw it as a big, crazy movie. And it went in 50 theaters in New York, screened it. And it was everywhere over the world. And it made, hundreds of millions, apparently. But of course, none of that the money ever came back to these guys who made it.
And that was in 1984 when that movie was released.
Yeah, 84. So, and straight after that, he then went to jail for the movie before, the Sweden for the Swedes. And it's during this time when he is in jail, has made a super successful movie that he doesn't get any money for, sitting in jail for the other movie that turned out a disaster. He's planning to do a horror movie I mean, which is basically the second half of Blood Tracks. That's the movie he's going to make. As he's sitting in the jail, the band that is Easy Action, who is the band playing Solid Gold in the movie, they call him when he's in jail.
They fans of him, or
no? They've seen Ninja Mission and they love it, and they have a big record deal, but they think the record is not really lifting, so they're thinking about maybe if we make some music for a movie, we can start to cause some commotion and interest in the band. So that's their idea.
Oh wow!
And I just go through the rest of Mats Helge's career first, and then we go back to that.
Okay.
They make Blood Tracks. There's so much to say about that, but the Blood Tracks is made, and then he make another movie called Eagle Island, which has also been called Ninja Mission 2 in some areas. And Ninja Mission, Blood Tracks, and Eagle Island, those three movies are, to me, clearly his best movies, the most fun to watch and accomplished. But there's no money, and now Mats Helge made the brilliant choice to this doesn't work. So I should make a children's movie. So he makes a children's movie in 1986, I think it is, or 7, called Spökligan in Swedish. I don't know how to translate the Ghost Crew. I think I'd seen the Ghostbusters and wanted to do a children's version of that, sort of. And it's a complete disaster because you can make action movies and horror movies with little money and little talent, but when you make a children's movie and have no idea what you're doing and no script, it gets very confusing. So I think that kind of killed the little of career he had going. And in the end of the 80s, he go back to this Ninja Mission style movies, but with even lower budgets, and many of them now shot in former Yugoslavia instead of Sweden. And they hired David Carradine for a couple of days and shot him and made it into 3 movies, which Carradine had no idea of.
Yeah, I watched one of those. I watched The Mad Bunch from 1989.
But those movies are very similar. It's very hard to tell them apart.
Right, yeah. I mean, that's kind of like all his action movies kind of bleed together for me. Like if you sit back and just try and decipher which one is, The Hired Gun or Ninja Mission or Eagle Island, it's hard because he uses a lot of the same actors.
Yeah, and I think he also hired a very respected Swedish director called Arne Mattsson to co-direct 2 of these last movies. I think only because he wanted to get some credibility, because Arne Mattsson at that point was very old, and in fact this was the last things he ever did in cinema. I think it was in his 80s. So
yeah, and I watched The Hired Gun and The Mad Bunch, which he's co-director, or listed as co-director, but I'm pretty sure he directed as much of those movies as I did. He was just on the set maybe, or clearly it's Mats Helge movies. Did that pay off at all, having Arne Mattsson's name applied?
No.
It didn't matter.
And I think this last movie, I think it was supposed to be a TV series called The Northern Express in the early 90s, because there was a new TV channel called TV3 in Sweden. And a lot of the people from that TV channel is involved with this. I think it's a pilot for a TV series that never, ever happened. Yeah, then he just disappeared. I mean, because he never paid any tax, so they were after him. So since then, he has been living abroad hiding. But he has some producer. There's a movie called Chili Dogs with Leslie Nielsen and some made in 2001. Mats Helge Olsen is some sort of producer on that one. But apart from that and then nothing. It's just been gone.
There was a documentary in 2013, the director who disappeared, the story of the Ninja Mission. And
I went to the premiere of that. I know those guys who made the movie. I helped them a little bit.
Nice.
Yeah, because I was wondering, I was like, well, that was made in 2013. So has he since, I guess he hasn't still resurfaced then.
I think he's come back now because he, from what I've read, he's very sick.
Oh.
So they have pardoned him so he can come back to his hometowns to end his days.
Okay.
That's what I've read. I don't remember what actually happened.
Yeah, what a career and what a story surrounding him.
Yeah, and he called himself Sweden's only professional filmmaker.
Okay. Settle down.
Because he never got any money from anyone. He just made it all himself.
Yeah, you mentioned that them not getting back any money from Ninja Mission, and they mentioned it in the documentary. There's a theory that since New Line Cinema was the one who picked it up for distribution in the United States, that they took all the money and used it for the Nightmare on Elm Street movies.
Yeah, I doubt it, but
yeah, it's a theory. I'm not standing by it, but I thought that was an interesting thing that came up in that documentary.
Yeah, but I think it's a similar story than with the Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Yeah, the mafia.
Yeah, I think the money turned into wrong hands. That we don't know much about. And then also, I don't know how much money Ninja Mission actually made. It's just, if I know Mats Helge Olsson right, he's exaggerating very, very much. But clearly, it must have made some money because it's released everywhere. And
yeah, I would think so.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's fun. I mean, I did watch that one too. It's just like this kind of drug fuel, just nonstop. I mean, there are some lulls in like all his movies, but this one has a lot of throwing stars involved. It's just fun to watch. It's just, anything with ninjas too is usually even poorly made. It's fun.
It was a few years there. I remember in school that how old were we? 10 to 12-year-olds. We made those stars in out of metal pieces in school. So
would you grind them and stuff? You grind them down with sharpens?
Yeah, we did them in the carpentry class or whatever it was called. So it was it was like a factory.
That's funny.
Yeah, so ninjas were very popular for maybe 3 years.
Yeah, and you have to hand it to like Mats Helge for just nothing stopped him from pumping out these ninja-driven action movies. Just I would advise if anybody did dive into his catalog and wanted to watch all of them, just kind of spread out your intake, because like I kind of watched a bunch of them consecutively, and like I said, they all kind of bleed together.
Yeah, it's very hard to tell, especially those later ones.
Yeah,
so
sure
similar.
Yeah, so okay, let me cover some other of the crew real quick. So the screenplay, Mats Helge wrote the script for Blood Tracks with an Annabelle Wolf, who I couldn't find anything else with the credit attributed to her. Blood Track cinematographer is Hans Dittmer, and he also photographed Mats Helge's Eagle Island, The Mad Bunch, and The Hired Gun.
All his friends, basically.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of that going on in this. So it's like the original score is composed by, I'll probably butcher this name, Dag Unig, but he pretty much composed all of Mats Helge's films: Ninja Mission, Eagle Island, and The Russian Terminator. Russian Terminator, I thought was a lot of fun. It was just robotic dubbing and like hilariously unnatural dialogue. And of course, you have when we get to the cast, Fredrik Offren.
This is his first acting role.
Oh, the Russian Ninja?
No, Blood Tracks.
Oh,
okay, that's right. That's 85. Yeah, Russian Ninja's 89. Yeah. So he did the score, and also the original composer. He did a score for a movie that I know you loved, Erica, War Dog from 1987.
Fuck yes, that movie rules.
Yeah, War Dog is directed by Anders Nilsson, who was the assistant of Mats Helge Olsson on the earlier films, when he was just a kid.
Oh wow!
Because they came from the same area. So they were playing with guns, and I think Mats Helge saw them and it's like, oh, you guys, you should help me with mine.
Yeah, you're our crew now. You like guns? Let's do it.
Something like that. But War Dog is great. I mean, I think it's better than any Mats Helge movie.
I need to watch that one because, Erica did comment how great that was.
Yeah, and Anders Nilsson, he had a real career in Sweden after making, thrillers and stuff. Big Swedish movies. War Dog is great.
Yeah.
And back to the music, I'd be dumb not to point out the original songs that are provided by Swedish rockers Easy Action. who performed the title song Blood Tracks, and I think there's like maybe 2 other in the movie. They also make up the majority of the cast. But yeah, Daniel, can you dive into their career and kind of describe the members of Easy Action?
I know the 2 of the songs in the movie, Blood Tracks and that closing song, they were made basically in real time. As they said, oh, we have a couple of songs. And they said, oh, let's hear them. And there was a piano there, and they just, invented the songs on the spot.
Wow. These guys were pros. Like they had the actual idea to reach out to Mats Helge. That's like, I didn't know that. That's interesting.
I mean, the band Easy Action were kind of happening this time. They had a big record deal with the Warner Brothers in America, but the record was not really happening. So they wanted to find some way to make this career lift, and somehow they thought, oh, let's try to make music for a movie. And they had seen the Ninja Mission, so they called Mats Helge, who turned out to be in jail. But of course, he thought like, oh, you have a contract with Warner Brothers, so it's one of the biggest movie producing companies in the world. Of course, we're gonna do this. So he was like, yeah, you're not gonna make the music. You're gonna make the music. You're gonna be in the movie. And he had a movie script for, which I think is like the second half of Blood Tracks, and he just said, I add this first half where a rock band comes to do a video, and then this family can kill them instead of what I originally had in mind. So that has how the movie actually happened, because of this band. And it's, for me, it's stupid that they don't call themselves the real name in the movie, because if you want them to raise their career, they should call themselves Easy Action.
Right.
But apparently they took the name from a T-Rex song called Solid Gold Easy Action. So they took the other half of that song title.
That's cool.
That's funny.
But then the members of Easy Action, some of them had quite spectacular careers before Easy Action. Like the bass player, Pia Tyrén, or Alex Tyrone, as he's called in the movie. He was the driving force behind a band called Noise, who, when I was a child, they were one of the 2 biggest Swedish bands of all. Sold so much and toured Sweden all the time. But they were just a bunch of kids that got super popular. It was a little bit punk, but more like pop rock with a punk edge. So everyone who was a kid in the late 70s, early 80s, lived of this band. There was this band Noise, and there was another band called Gyllene Tider, who later turned into Roxette.
Oh, okay.
Who had a big career. It was those 2 bands were the biggest bands in Sweden, apart from ABBA, of course. The drummer from Easy Action and the guitarist, both of those guys joined Noise too later in Noise's career. So Easy Action was kind of the continuation of Noise. And the singer, Sinesan, he came from a pure punk rock background. He was originally a drummer for a couple of the earliest Swedish punk bands like Belsen and Brilliant Boys. But he, in the end of that career, he switched to vocals, and then became the vocalist for Easy Action. So a lot of experience, and especially Pia Tyrén, the bass player, he had already had a big music career before he joined Easy Action. And also that band Noise, 2 of those members they were teens, like 14 to 16 when they were big, and 2 of them got into drugs and died because of that. So it was like a rock myth to the extreme.
Yeah.
Even before this movie.
Yeah, the singer Zinzan, that's how you say it. He can do some screaming. He reminds me of when I grew up as a kid. I was really into hair metal with my brothers and stuff. But there's a band called Cinderella, and Tom Kiefer can sing. They sound exactly the same when he's singing. The Danger Zone part, and it's good. It's actually really catchy.
But both Sinesan, or Bosse Stagman, who is his real name, but Sinesan and Pia Tyrén, they quit Easy Action before this movie was released. So they are basically cut out of the movie. You don't see them very much after.
Oh, okay.
But Sinesan joined a band called Kingpin straight after this movie, who changed their name to Shotgun Messiah and moved into Guns N' Roses' house in Los Angeles in '87, I think, and had quite a career on the Sunset Strip, '87 to '90, I think. And the bass player of that band, I don't remember his name, but he became the bass player and guitarist and main creative force for a while of Marilyn Manson's band. So,
oh, wow.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's a lot of things happening. And then, of course, Key Marcel, or Kjell Löfbom, is his real name, quit Easy Action to join Europe after they released the Final Countdown. So he was on all the Final Countdown tour and then for a couple of other records with Europe. So he was a big rock star for a couple of years after this movie.
Yeah, he made some money.
Yeah.
Yeah, so Solid Gold, all those guys are pretty much consist of the majority of the cast. Let me go over some of the other cast members real quick. And like we said earlier, like this is a Swedish-made film, but the majority of the actors involved are American. So I shouldn't have to butcher too many of these names, but there's Jeff Harding, who plays John. He's the guide / helicopter pilot, or snowmobile driver, I should say. He has some small roles in some films, including Hackers, John Landis's Spies Like Us, and he had a decent role as Phil in Alfie, starring Jude Law. Matt Fitzpatrick plays Bob, who is the manager of Solid Gold. And he's acted in a lot of TV series and TV movies, but he just has other small roles. One is in a feature film as a second NASA officer in Tobe Hooper's sci-fi Life Force, which was cool to see. And he also played an aircraft. Yeah, I love that sci-fi. An aircraft carrier officer in the very 90s action Navy SEALs, starring Charlie Sheen and Michael Biehn. Who else do we have? Peter Merrill plays Dave, the sound guy. Again, just small roles. He was in Kubrick's Full Metal Jacket as a TV journalist. He was in another action movie called Hurricane Smith, starring Carl Weathers. Yeah, I mean, most of these people, like, they don't really have too many credits. But then there is Sonny. I want to get on to Sonny, who's played by Frederick Offren. He's like John's right-hand man. They're kind of the guides, and he flies the chopper. And Daniel, you nailed it in your book, Swedish Sensations Films, whenever you talked about Offren in Matt's Helge films, because he is in a lot of them. And in The Hired Gun, you wrote, Offren looks more stupid than ever in his lousy haircut and silly beard. And after reading that, that's like all I could think of when I was watching these numerous movies. Because, he consistently puts on these like wooden performances, and he has such like a, like your friend's dad look to him. He's not incredibly, he's not a very good looking guy at all, but he has a specific look, and it
he was known as a silver fox. I learned.
Yeah, he kind of looks like if David Hasselhoff's Michael Knight character from the early 80s never grew up and never outgrew his look. So he has that big hair and shirt tucked into tight jeans. But yeah, I the more I watched him in Matt Helge's movies, his action films, I became kind of like enthralled in how kind of poor of an actor he is, but just how he sticks to his look.
I think he did 2 movies that was not by Mats Helge Olsson. So he was basically, his whole career is like 7 or 8 Mats Helge movies. and Blood Tracks, this is the first. And I have no idea how they met. I think they met through his girlfriend, who is doing something else in the movie. Because he's not from Sweden, he's from Holland. So I don't really know how we got involved with all of this.
Yeah, they became friends for life. I mean, he's funny to watch in all these movies. Yeah, and Matt Helge Olsson also plays, he plays Frank the caretaker, the random guy that gets killed in the very beginning of Blood Tracks. And I guess he has a few small roles in some of his other films. Most notably, he plays Ivan, the evil Ivan in The Ninja Mission. And I guess he's kind of going for his Alfred Hitchcock acting moments. He just kind of pops up.
I think it was that, and I also think it's cheaper than to hire anyone.
That's true. Because it looks like he played an intruder in Eagle Island as well. So he's definitely, like I said, you respect what he does in his films to get them made, and even if he has to act, do it.
There's also another guy in the movie somewhere called Derek Ford, who was supposed, I think he was assistant director or something, but I think his main thing, he supplied a movie with those British girls, the groupies, because he was a British sex movie director. So, yeah, I think they contacted him to get those girls, but then he said, I'll do it if I can be a part of the movie. So I think he's credited as an assistant director. Though I doubt he did anything but bringing those girls.
Yeah, so I guess we can just start diving in and talking about Blood Tracks. Erica, what did you think about it? What are your thoughts on it? What are in your notes?
I have a few things that I really like about it. I think it's how do I say it? I'm trying to find a way to say it nicely, but fuck it. I don't care. It's an ineffective slasher movie, but it has all the things that I want to see in a slasher movie. So it still is like that warm blanket. Like it still makes me happy. I one thing that I think is really funny in it is that, you mentioned like the cast in this, there's so many people in it. A lot of them look alike. So it's hard to sort of keep track of who's who. And no one really stands out as being like the people that we are technically supposed to be following, like the leads in it, and like who's really smart in this. No one is smart in this. Like there's one guy who keeps saying like, okay, just make sure you guys stay together. And then 5 minutes later, he's like, we should split up. So I'm like, yeah, just, I'm fine just watching a movie with tits, with gore, with sex and whatever, and just killing off a bunch of people. It's got some great kills in it, like the one where the girl gets sliced in half and the pickaxe through the head and all these things. I think it definitely starts. It's one of those rare movies that kind of really picks up as it goes along further. Like I knew when I recommended this one to you, Lance, I watched the first 5 minutes, and as soon as the band started playing the song, I'm like, this is a Lance movie. So, but it kind of flounders a little bit there for me. So I guess like my main complaint, my only real complaint with it is just like the high number of characters. And it's fine. If you want to have a high body count, that's what you need to do. But you need to have like a sort of core group that we can distinguish from everyone else and know who we're following, and then just let all of this sort of side peripheral characters die off. I like the cannibals a lot, even though I'm not really clear how. I mean, I'm sure how it's like it's been 40 years. I'm wondering, is it frostbite? Like, why are they look like mutants now? But I tried to apply Italian horror movie logic to it, and I was like, you know what? I'm not even going to ask the question. I don't care. That's just how it is in this movie's universe. I think one of them looked like it was kind of out of the Planet of the Apes, which I thought was funny. And then the bearded one you mentioned looked like Rob Zombie, so I was kind of rooting for him to die. But
yeah, I'm terrible. One of them looked like Eric Stoltz in Mask to me. It's just square.
Oh, yeah.
So, I mean, I enjoyed. I think this would be a really fun movie with like a group of people. It's, it's not a great slasher by any means, but I think it's got enough elements for fans of horror to enjoy it.
Right. Yeah. It's interesting to me that you brought up, Daniel, how while Mads Helge was in prison, he had this slasher script or idea, and then Easy Action reached out to him. And then that's when he wrote the first half of the movie. And you can kind of see that because the first 30 minutes, although it has that cold open, with murdering the husband, and then, and maybe another murder, but it's a very slow setup without much horror. It's basically like a bad 80s comedy. And I kind of like that. I mean, you can't really tell what the movie's going to turn into.
Yeah. And I know he sold it into them by saying, we're going to shoot that part in Yugoslavia. So you get a vacation. But as far as I know, that was never his idea. So they did it in Sweden, but just to get them more into it.
Yeah, and like you said, Erica, there is a decent body count in this, which is kind of absolutely necessary to keep people watching. I mean, because it does drag, and the characters, they kind of have personalities, but they all bleed together. So killing them off kind of at least picks them off to where you can kind of focus in on the last two. The only one that stands out, I think I already said, is Frederick Alfren, who he looks like nobody else in the movie. So hey, there's Sonny.
Yeah, that's pretty much it.
He clearly should have been in the cabin all the time, being the boss or the manager or something.
Yeah.
But now it's just, I mean, the band and the girls, they look exactly the same, all of them. So it's impossible to tell anyone apart from the first half. And then in the second half, it's so dark in that band of factories, so you can't tell. And then how many brothers are there supposed to be? I think it's more brothers in the end than it was in the beginning.
Yeah, did they mate with the mom? And
I don't know. It's very unclear.
Yeah, and also like Bob, the manager, he's pretty funny. He plays emotionless and stupid really well. But I kept getting him confused too with John, the guy. They both look a lot alike and kind of act and react in the same way.
Yeah.
Yes, and wherever anyone find a walkie-talkie or whatever, the first thing they say, "How the fuck does the thing work?" it's like nobody knows anything about anything they have up there. And also, and all those guides and Fredrik Offline in the other cabin somewhere else for some reason, they are just sitting there, not being able to contact those people, but they're doing nothing. They're just sitting there waiting. Yeah. We'll see. Yeah,
and in the beginning, they were hired to be like their guides and take care of the crew, but they're just like kicking back, in their cabin. Yeah. So it's Is there supposed to be some sort of social commentary in this movie with that cold open? With her killing her husband and then going into hiding. Like I don't really understand. Were domestically abused women like are they shunned for killing their abuser? Like in the I guess this was in the 40s.
Yeah, it's supposed to be in 1945. I mean, during the Great War. But I mean, it's so long. Why must they hide for 40 years?
Yeah,
that's what I was wondering.
And I wonder if no one has ever discovered them before. I mean, what are they eating? How are they living? And they don't look 40 years older. I mean, especially not the mother.
No,
she looked exactly this.
Yeah, she just puts on an old lady voice, and it's just horribly done.
Yeah,
and also I don't think any of the sons even look 40.
No, and I think they're disguising the fact that they couldn't age them by putting them in weird mutated makeup. Was my guess, because otherwise, and I did let go of it. Like I'm not trying to figure out why are they mutated, and I just am, but at the same time. It's like, well, maybe that's the reason that they're like, oh, let's make them mutated factory dwellers now.
I have a theory that there was an explanation in the original script, but this adding of this rock band part you made that go away.
Yeah, I can see that. Absolutely. I wish, because there were so many brothers in it, and it's hard to not compare this movie to something like The Hills Have Eyes. But when you have, your mountain cannibals who are all very distinct from one another, and it's easy to tell all of them apart, versus Blood Tracks, where, I can tell a couple of them apart, but like Daniel said, it's so dark in there. Half the time, I don't know who's killing who in the movie.
And I remember when we had a fanzine about movies in the 90s, we were obsessing with this movie. One particular aspect of this movie, there is a hole in the fence going into the factory, and sometimes it feels like 50% of the movie is shot with people walking in and out of that hole in the fence. There's so many people going in and out.
Yeah, I did notice that too. Yeah, my theory with them being deformed was something like within the factory there might have been some sort of gases or something, but yeah, it's never explained.
It did have that, like when the first guy walks into the factory, it did have like a corrosive gas warning sign on there. Yeah, but they didn't.
That's the weakest explanation.
Yeah, that's maybe their way of like explaining it, but they didn't even have a throwaway line to explain it. But yeah, it's fine. It's whatever. It's fucking, it's mutants in a factory killing a bunch of dumb people. I love it, whatever.
I think it would have been amazing if, like, in the beginning, in the cold open, when the mother grabs the kids and escapes, to go in hiding, she accidentally leaves like a tiny toddler because, she has like 8 kids or whatever. Mm-hmm. And then they grow up, and then one of those kids is like the manager of Solid Gold. And then there's like a family that's reunited.
That's funny.
that's just wishful thinking and me trying to. I don't know. I mean, you just can't explain Mats Helge Olsen plots in it. So
Sure.
But also, the first times I saw this movie, it was a very cut version, and it makes a lot less sense when you don't get this violence. And also was copied, fifth generation video copy, and you really couldn't see what was going on in the factory. But then when I got the pristine copy, and the movie. It works so much better with all this gore in it because it's very, very gory for being a Swedish movie of the 80s.
Yeah, and the gore is good. I mean, the practical effects used, although sometimes it's a little dark when filmed, but what you can see, it's strong. Like it's
I think at least half of the budget went into those scenes. I'm sure.
Because it definitely didn't go into the groupies, because that was given from the co-director or assistant director. And then the terrible ending, because Mats Helge seems to spend a lot of time, walking through fences that have holes in it, or people trying to figure out walkie-talkies. But that ending is so abrupt. It's like, boom, jump in the chopper, let's do the credits. I had so much fun with the movie, and that kind of elevates the what the fuckness is happening in this movie, but it's such a horrible speeded up finale.
I think it's funny because the last movie that we covered, Blood Delirium, ended the exact same way. Two people getting in a helicopter and credits.
Yeah, with that one, they spent they spent minutes on the helicopter and too much time.
Right.
But yeah, that seems to be the easy route to end a movie.
I felt the same way about Dawn of the Dead and Day of the Dead. The ending, you just get into a helicopter and it's over.
Right. Yeah. It's the best way to escape. And I guess we'll never know if that bearded brother survives from his wound or if he's burned in the factory. We'll just wait for the sequel.
Blood Tracks Part 2. Yeah. He's, he cauterized it. He's fine.
He should. Yeah, he should be. I mean, if they can deal living alone, in the snow with their open face wounds and sores, he can handle missing an arm.
Yeah, for sure. Daniel, did you have any other points or thoughts you wanted to bring up about Blood Tracks?
I don't know. There's so many funny scenes in it. I think that avalanche where the car gets buried in it's like they're scared. Oh, let's go to the car. It's exciting, and then the car gets buried in snow, and everybody's panicking and running out. And the fact that those girls, and especially her, they have no clothes. They're basically naked.
Yeah,
right.
It's in its freezing environment. And those avalanches, I found out while making my book, I guess, they actually started those avalanches themselves with dynamite. And
oh wow!
I don't think they had any control over that, and the band was quite scared. But they'll say, we are professionals. We know what to handle this. They're clearly not professionals in any sense.
Yeah, the guys from Easy Action too, they're presented in a very, or I guess they're Solid Gold here, but in a weird kind of, they're just kind of wimpy. Like when he runs outside, he's like, hey, wait, it's cold. I catch cold fast,
And both the singer and the bass player, they just disappear from the movie after they shot the video. You don't see them anymore.
Yeah.
And that's because they quit the band, apparently. So they cut them out.
Yeah, the singer, he was interesting in the video. He's like a little guy, and his tumbling I thought was the best of the crew.
I did like that when they tumbled down the snow. That was fun. I was like, oh, that's adorable.
Well, I love how it starts. Before that, it's just silence, and they just pop up, on screen, and they're making their faces, crossing their arms, and then that's when they start rolling down the hill. It's just, that whole scene's just a blast to watch. All right, so should we go on to double features and see what our double feature picks might be?
Sure. Daniel, did you have a double feature pick in mind for a movie to go with Blood Tracks?
Well, the film I think about, and I think also it's the film that made the Easy Action coming up with this idea, is Kiss Meets the Phantom of the Park.
Nice.
Destroy you, all of you. You kids will be my instrument.
Yikes. like it.
Who is on a different level also, the band Kiss, they were very big at that time when I made, but still that this idea that let's make a movie and we become bigger than we are, it's going to be great. I mean, Kiss meets the Phantom of the Park is the big band failure to do this, whereas Blood Tracks is that starving trying band's failure.
Right. Yeah.
And it's grittier and bloodier, whereas Kiss Meets the Phantom of the Park it's more of a matinee movie.
Right.
This is the Texas Chainsaw, Hills of Ice, grimy.
Yeah, that's a great pick.
It is.
Lance, what about you? What would be your double feature pick?
So I was going to go like the rocker route, and I actually thought of Kiss Meets the Phantom of the Park or like Black Roses, Rock and Roll Nightmare, but my pick focuses more on the dirty and deformed cannibalistic family. So my pick is the British horror Deathline, aka Raw Meat, from 1972.
Okay. Oh, that guy.
Yeah,
directed by Gary Sherman, and it stars Donald Pleasance, who's like, he plays this hilarious inspector who gives like you mad Peter Sellers as Inspector Clouseau vibes. It's really funny. And then Christopher Lee has a fun cameo. But yeah, I mean, it's about a network of cannibals living under Russell Square Underground in London. And decades before, they were working class diggers, and they were trapped underground due to a cave-in during the construction of the underground tunnel. And the construction company didn't bother to save any of these workers because it would cost too much money. So they lived down there for these generations and developed like their own subterranean culture, like essentially breeding and turning into these grotesque cannibals. And one is forced out because his wife dies, and basically he kidnaps a girl, and you kind of sympathize with him because he doesn't know, because he kind of wants to care for her and take and not kill her. So it's kind of like the bearded guy in Blood Tracks. But more just like the gross, the like subterranean hiding family. And Deathline has some really great gore and practical effects as well. So yeah, I don't know if it's on any streaming services, but I know that Blue Underground have a great Blu-ray release out there.
Yeah, nice pick.
So
for my pick, I went into this thinking I want to just pick another movie from Daniel's book. I wanted another Swedish Sensations film. So I watched a few. I watched, and I ruled out The Visitors, which was like an Amityville-esque movie. Fear Has a Thousand Eyes, like Satanist sexploitation, and Scorched Heat. So eliminated those, and I actually ended up picking probably the favorite movie I've watched from that book, at least so far. I picked War Dog for my double feature. Just as double feature, Swedish Sensations film, fun way to spend 3 to 4 hours with these two movies together. They don't really have anything in common besides that, and like sort of like the over the top elements, but it's about a Vietnam vet who has to rescue his brother from a government brainwashing super soldier experiment. It takes a weird turn at the end that feels kind of like a slasher movie, but overall it's pretty gory. It's got lots of gun battles. And the number one reason I picked it, because it has my favorite thing in the world in movies, child murder. So
nice.
Yeah, but it's made by the Mats Helge protege, Anders Nilsson.
Right. Yeah. So there is a good small connection there for it too. So yeah.
And I think the movies were made about the same time, roughly.
Yeah, this War Dog said it was 1987, so yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it was shot earlier, for sure.
Oh, okay.
So I think they were shot around the same time.
Awesome, okay. All right, so we've got Kiss Meets the Phantom of the Park, Raw Meat, or War Dog for a double feature to go with Blood Tracks.
That sounds like a good lineup.
Yeah, I think so. All right, so getting into next episode, it is my pick. And next episode, we are going to be covering Patrick Still Lives from 1980.
Oh my God, I should have been on
that. This is directed by Mario Landi. This is either an unofficial sequel or a ripoff of the Australian movie Patrick from 1978, which I'm sure we'll discuss in the episode. And it follows essentially the same premise as Patrick, but it puts its Italian sleaze stamp on it. And it's about a young man in a coma with telepathic powers. This has a Severin Blu-ray release from 2020, and as of this recording, has 646 views on Letterboxd. The original Patrick is streaming on US Amazon Prime right now, and there is another remake. I don't know if I'm going to bring myself to watch it. It's on Tubi from 2014, starring Charles Dance, called Patrick: Evil Awakens.
I'll do it.
Thank you. Fuck.
Tywin Lannister.
So, and we are actually going to have another guest for that episode. Sam Deegan is going to be joining us for Patrick Still Lives. She is the co-host of the Daughters of Darkness podcast, an author of multiple books, including her upcoming release, World War II in European Art House Cinema. And you can also hear her on multiple commentary tracks for many of the Blu-ray labels we talk about on this show, like Vinegar Syndrome, Severin, Arrow, 88, and many more, including she's got a commentary track on my double feature pick for Demon Witch Child, which was Malabimba, the Malicious Whore. And when I asked her about guesting for the episode, she says she loves this movie more than most things, so I'm sure we will have a lot to talk about.
Sounds like Daniel does too.
Yeah, I love all those 5 movies produced by Gabriele Crisanti from 79 to 82 with, Malabimba, Better Live, Giallo Venezia especially, Zombie Free, The Burial Ground, and Bimba di Satana. That quintet of movie has, especially in the early 90s, those movies were very, very hard to come by. So we were like trolling around in Italy trying to find original copies. It was the only way to see them back then. So.
Yeah, I bet. And Lance, bonus, this movie is also shot at the same location as Burial Ground. So,
yes. Okay.
I mean, there's a bunch of movies shot at that location, but this one too for you.
There's a connection.
Yeah. Okay, if you are not already, please give us a follow on Instagram, Twitter, or Facebook, all at Unsung Horrors. You can follow me on Letterboxd under the username Also Watched. And Lance, where can people find and follow you?
I'm El Shaibi at Instagram, Twitter, and what's the other one? Letterboxd. What about you, Daniel? Do you have anything to plug or any social medias?
No, I don't. I'm on Facebook if someone want to reach out to me, but then I'm sitting here. I'm working on a new book about Swedish extreme punk, hardcore of the 80s. So it's taken another few years, I guess. But that's what I'm doing right now.
Okay. Well, we'll be sure to put links to your current books in show notes. But other than that, really just want to thank you for joining us and sharing all of this really awesome background information about the director and the movie and and the band and everything.
It was great. Yeah. Thanks so much, Daniel.
Yeah, thank you. It was fun.
And thanks to everyone for listening. And we'll see you back next episode for Patrick Still Lives.
Yeah, that's great. I'm going to listen to that.
You're listening to the Prescribed Films Podcast Network, home to hundreds of hours of free podcast entertainment. The shows on this network all have a common goal, providing you with the best discussions about movies and other forms of entertainment media. The PFPN hopes to fill your earholes with audio joy. Visit our website with links to all the other amazing shows at www.thepfpn.com. Thanks for listening.